Should I go ahead? Should I share mine first, Juicy, or how do you?
It's okay. I will tell you because we have a brief of the introduction, and I will tell you when the floor is yours, and you can share at that point. Okay?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bonjour à toutes et tous, nous vous remercions de votre présence. Avant de commencer, nous voudrions partager avec vous quelques informations concernant la manière d'interagir durant le webinaire. Premièrement, aujourd'hui, nous parlerons en anglais. Si vous n'êtes pas à l'aise avec cela, il n'y a pas de problème, nous déposerons l'enregistrement du webinaire sur YouTube. Deuxièmement, nous vous proposons d'écouter les interventions jusqu'à leur fin et ensuite vous disposerez d'un temps de questions et réponses. Si vous désirez poser une question ou faire une remarque, s'il vous plaît, écrivez votre nom dans le chat. Nous vous contacterons à la fin des interventions et vous pourrez allumer votre micro et votre webcam afin d'interagir. Nous essayerons de vous aider avec la traduction du mieux que nous pouvons. S'il vous est possible de parler en anglais, cela nous sera d'une grande aide. En tant qu'étudiants en muséologie, nous nous sommes présentés bénévolement et nous ne sommes pas des professionnels de la traduction. Nous sommes sûrs que vous comprendrez si nous commettons quelques erreurs. Lors du webinaire précédent, nous avons rencontré quelques problèmes concernant l'utilisation du chat. Si vous ne pouvez pas utiliser le chat, n'hésitez pas à lever la main si vous souhaitez poser une question après les interventions. Vous pouvez le faire en utilisant le bouton Team ou en ouvrant votre caméra et votre microphone durant le temps dédié aux échanges et aux questions. Nous vous rappelons également de bien vouloir désactiver votre microphone pendant les interventions. Si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à nous écrire à l'adresse suivante babbletowerwebinars@gmail.com. Nous serons attentifs aux emails envoyés durant le webinaire au cas où vous rencontreriez un problème technique de dernière minute et mettrons tout en œuvre afin de répondre à votre demande. La plateforme Teams est un outil que nous utilisons en raison des circonstances actuelles, mais nous ne gérons pas cet outil de manière professionnelle. Enfin, nous allons enregistrer ce webinaire afin de le stocker sur YouTube. S'il vous plaît, si vous n'êtes pas à l'aise avec l'enregistrement, vous avez le choix de regarder ce webinaire avec des sous-titres à partir de fin avril sur YouTube. Si vous utilisez votre caméra, soyez attentif à ce qui apparaîtra à l'écran. Si vous avez des questions sur l'organisation ou un problème technique, n'hésitez pas à nous contacter via le chat ou par le mail Babbletower. Nous vous remercions pour votre attention et nous vous souhaitons un bon webinaire. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. Before starting, we would like to share with you some information on who to interact during the webinar. First, today we will talk in English. If you don't feel comfortable with that, don't worry. We will upload the registration of the webinar on YouTube. Second, you will hear the interventions and at the end, there will be time for questions and answers. If you want to ask a question or make a comment, please write your name in the chat. We'll call you at the end of the interventions and you will be able to open your microphone and webcam in order to interact. We'll try to help with the translation at the best, but if you can speak English, that will help us a lot. As students in museology, we are volunteers and we are not professional translators. We are sure you will understand if we make some mistakes. We have detected some problems with the use of the chat. Please, if you cannot use the chat, feel free to raise your hands if you want to ask a question after the intervention. You can do it using Teams button or opening your camera and microphone during the Q&A time. If you have any question, please do not hesitate to write us an email to babbletowerwebinars@gmail.com. We will check it also during the webinar in order to try to assist if you have any last-moment technological issue. Teams technology is a means that we are using due to the current circumstances. We do not manage this tool professionally, but we are trying to do our best for making this a nice experience for all of us. Third, we kindly remind you to silence your microphone during the interventions. Finally, we are going to record this webinar in order to store it on YouTube. Please, if you don't feel comfortable, you have the option to watch the webinar by YouTube with subtitles by the end of April. If you use the webcam, please be conscious of what will appear on the screen. If you have any question about the organization or a technical problem, don't hesitate to contact us via chat or the Babel Tour email. Thank you. Enjoy it.
So thank you for being here this afternoon. We are now at the 6th event of our webinar series, and many of you have already joined us during the previous webinars. But for those of you who are here for the first time, let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Giusy Pappalardo, and I'm a lecturer and a researcher at urban and regional planning at the University of Catania in Sicily, which is a southern region of Italy. And thanks to a European-funded project, I'm virtually at University of Liège as a visiting researcher, and together with Manuelina Duarte and Martina Barcelloni Corte, we are conducting this webinar series. And of course, we want to thank all the speakers that are giving their interesting contributions. And we also want to thank the organizing committee, which is mostly formed by students that are volunteering for translation and other commitments. So thank you again for the great job that you are doing for us. So this webinar series has been organized with the idea of exploring transdisciplinary and transnational connections around a very broad and general question, which is how do people relate with the tangible and intangible signs of their past in order to shape a better future. And starting from this very broad question, we are opening up a space of discussion, which we think may add some food for thoughts, especially during these hard times that we are experiencing due to the pandemic crisis, and which of course will require us to rethink how we face the current social and ecological challenges. So we already had some insightful contribution, which has been mostly, not all of them, but most of them discussed from a museology perspective. Today, we're trying to stress a bit the contamination among fields of knowledge and practice, which is at the core of the concept of transdisciplinarity. And today we aim to explore the nexus between heritage, landscape, and local development. So in a while, we will hear three very diverse contributions which are connected each other through the idea that the flow between past, present, and future assets can take different shapes and form and has different effects on how communities live and transform their territory. So for this reason, today we will cross various disciplines and various contexts, and we will move from landscape architecture and ecological design, thanks to the first guest, which is Tim Schauwecker from the Department of Landscape Architecture of Mississippi State University in USA. Tim will focus on historical maps as powerful means for understanding everything in relationship between people and landscape, and his approach to environmental history is related with his work on habitat restoration and ecological design. And let me just briefly say that from talking of maps is very relevant for my field of research as regional planner. With my action research group in Italy, we have worked a lot with maps as powerful means for engaging local communities, and we witnessed the empowering role of them, especially when they are used for allowing people to express their own voice on their places of life. Then we have a second guest, which is still from southern USA, from the University of Memphis, Katherine Lambert-Pennington, that is the director of the School of Urban Affairs and Public Policy. And Katherine will talk from an anthropological perspective, as she's a cultural and engaged anthropologist, and her research focuses on alternative development, eco-sustainability, participatory democracy, identity, race, and social inequality in US, Australia, and Italy. And today, she will offer a contribution on indigenous place and restorative attachment in suburban Sydney. And third guest is from Italy. Her name is Donatella Murtas, and with her contribution, we will talk again about eco-museums that have been often at the core of these webinars. Donatella has been trained as an architect and environmental engineer, and she's been long devoted to eco-museums and local development projects with a special focus on landscape heritage, interpretation, and community involvement at the national and international level. From 1996 to 1999, she was part of the first Ecomuseum Laboratory working team at the Piedmont region in Italy. And she's the developer and coordinator of the Ecomuseo dei Terrazzamenti della Vite, which is Ecomuseum of Terraces and Vine. And her contribution will talk of ecomuseums' unique and special role in everyday life. I don't know if Martina wants to say something now. She will be the discussant at the end of the presentations, and then we will have time for question and answers. Okay.
I just thank you for everyone for being here. I think we'll have a time after to discuss of the topic, and especially in relation to the future, as you were saying. So the project of the future in this very particular time, I think this concept of ecomuseum can really be interesting to sort of see it in these terms. So I'm very curious of listening to the guests. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's start with Team Historical Maps, then Katherine, Restorative Attachment, then Donatella will close with the role of ecomuseums, and we'll have a conversation. Now, Team, the floor is yours, and I think you can be able to share your screen. The mic is off, Tim. We cannot hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I still had my mic on.
Okay, now yes.
And so, are you seeing the title slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then I think we're ready to go.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for being here and for that wonderful introduction. It is really nice to work across disciplines with groups of people who are not only interested in what I do, but also are going to teach me a lot today about especially the topic of ecomuseums, which I think is not as well developed an idea in the United States as it is in Europe especially. And so I'm very interested to connect the work that we do, especially in habitat restoration and ecological design, with the ecomuseum concept and try to build some bridges between those two ideas. My presentation today is about historical survey documents and their use in ecological design, but not just the survey. I will focus on survey documents, and I think that you'll see their value and hopefully give me some recommendations about similar types of documents that exist, especially in Sicily, because I'm still interested in the Simeto watershed and trying to replicate some of the things that we've done here in that particular project, but also written descriptions of historical landscapes and how those are being interpreted both by scientists and by artists to help us visualize the historic landscapes that were described by early visitors, early European visitors. Obviously, there were plenty of people living in the United States at the time that those descriptions were written down. But a lot of the history of the people, the native inhabitants of the United States were not particularly well preserved through history, and that's unfortunate, and it's something that I'm especially interested to talk more with the archaeologists in the group about how to include more of that into my research. And so I am at the Department of Landscape Architecture at Mississippi State University. I'm an ecologist by training, and that's where the ecological design and the habitat restoration piece what of how I use these documents is going to come into this presentation to use these documents for watershed management and for habitat restoration. And so just to give you a sense of where I work is in the southeastern United States right now. In particular, one particular watershed that I will talk about, the Catalpa Creek watershed. But first, just to give you a little bit of the history of land management, land description in the United States in general, but also for the state of Mississippi. There were a number of treaties that were signed between the young government of the United States of America and the existing tribes of people who were already living here. Most of the time, these treaties were forcible in nature. They were not particularly, I would say, well managed. They were essentially turning lands, their historic lands, over to the United States government, and that did not go well for a lot of the native peoples of the United States, and that's unfortunate, but that's a completely different story. I don't think we have time for that today, but it definitely needs to be a part of the discussion. But the treaties that you can see here, and can you see my cursor as I move it across as a pointer?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so in southern Mississippi, these treaties were signed in the late 1800s, around 1798. And then in North Mississippi, most of these treaties were signed around 1804. And then the state of Mississippi was established in 1817. And so not long after statehood was established for Mississippi, there were a series of surveys that were commissioned originally by Thomas Jefferson, but then under the auspices of the General Land Office of the United States government, General Land Office surveyors came to Mississippi and began drawing these lines in the landscape. These are township and range lines, or they are referred to as township and range lines. And they had to be drawn by these surveyors. So the surveyors walked these lines and described the landscape as they walked the line. And then within each one of these township and ranges, there are 36 sections that also were described by the surveyors. So the treaties that were signed ceding these lands to the United States government were the Treaty of Fort Stevens, the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, the Treaty of Doak and Dexter, and then the Natchez down here on the right, or sorry, on the bottom left. So what was it like to be a surveyor? These groups of surveyors crisscrossed the landscape with their descriptions, and they were tasked with drawing the township and range lines. They were working in the field under whatever conditions were there at the time, meaning that in the rain and the snow or wherever they might be, they lived in the field with their crews. And you can see here the notes. They took copious notes about what they saw as they crisscrossed the landscape. And these notes have become very important historic documents for us to read through and to help us see the landscape as they saw it, because the notes were very descriptive. There were a number of deaths in these crews, a number of injuries. They would sometimes describe these deaths and injuries in their notes as well when a surveyor maybe was lost along the way. And so in addition to the notes about the landscape, there were also a lot of notes just about what it was like to be out there in the field all day doing this work. And so these surveys give us very detailed descriptions of the landscape, and these descriptions were along these township and range and then subsection lines. And so what they described was general descriptions of the land cover at the time. So the forest types, or the vegetation types, whether there were grasslands or savannas or prairies, as we know them in Europe. These are mostly referred to as meadows. Here in the United States, we refer to them as prairies, and it is one of the most important historic plant communities across the United States. That again is a whole other presentation on what prairies are and where they were and things like that. But it's just think of it as a meadow, but a native meadow, and all of the animals and the activities of the natives that went along with those. They gave general descriptions of the soils and their perceived productivity of those soils for agricultural purposes. And every place where they drew those lines, at the corner marks, they would they used what were called marker trees, and these trees helped them to find that corner. So they made a large mark on the tree, and then they also recorded the species of the tree, the size of the tree, and the geographic location of the tree. So they were all georeferenced, which is very important from a map making standpoint, because we can go back to them today. We still know where all of the township and range lines are, and so we can go back and see what it's like today as compared to what it was like historically. So then after they made these descriptions, they wrote very accurate, or they produced very accurate maps of what they saw in the landscape. And so again, these are going back almost 200 years now. And so this is a very useful historic description of the landscape. And so they are basically our best description of what the landscape looked like prior to the Industrial Revolution in the United States. And so these are what those notes look like, and they're being scanned currently, but many of them are available to us on the internet through the Bureau of Land Management in the United States. And so you can see the types of notes that they took. They showed these are a distance along the line that they were marking, and then they gave a general description that was geo-referenced by distance, and then here is one of the examples of the species of tree that they marked the corner on. This is blackjack oak, which is very common. But then for us, as we study prairies, he mentions this to poor open prairie. And so we know exactly where that started and exactly where it stopped. So it says, then he went into woods out of the prairie. This is a monument marker, so this is how he marked that corner. Blackjack oak, post oak. And so this is a very good description with ecological data of the dominant trees around that particular site, which is very useful to us. And then he goes on here to describe creeks and streams and wetlands that they also found in that particular area. So that is particularly useful to us, as well as the maps that were drawn from these notes, which we use today to show or to go back in time and see where those prairies were located and where the wetlands were located. This is a couple of examples of the maps that they drew as a result. And so here these are the section lines. So these are the subsections that were within a particular township and range. And so again, this is all on a grid system that describes and also shows graphically what the landscape looked like at the time of the survey. So very useful to us in the present day. And then we use this information. So now I'm going to shift a little bit from the historic information to how we are using this information in the present day for watershed management. And so this is a kind of to get you familiar with where we are, first off in the southeastern United States, in sort of east central Mississippi. And then this is the town where my university is located. And then you can see these with the crosshatch here are the university lands that are managed within this particular watershed. And so this watershed is the Catalpa Creek watershed. It is joined from the east by Redbud Creek. And so we are undertaking a lot of the same types of activities in this watershed as Juicy has been working in the Simeto River Valley in Sicily, a very similar approach where we are working with stakeholders to try to have positive impacts on the water quality, the water resources, and the land resources, the land cover resources that we help to manage in this particular watershed. And so the project has been going on for about 5 years. We're doing habitat restoration projects. We're working with local farmers to help them manage their pasture systems and cattle raising systems. And so as well as row crop agriculture, working with all of the different stakeholders in each of the within our watershed. And so now to go back to the historic description of this particular watershed, again, so you see the outline of the Catalpa Creek watershed right here. You see the city of Starkville, which is where I work, and then our university, Mississippi State University, has lands all the way across this particular area of the watershed. But you can see each one of these prairie locations is mapped from the 1832 survey. All of these are prairie islands that were contained within a belt of prairie locations that goes up into southern Tennessee and over into central Alabama. But you can also see the extensive wetland systems that are located here in the lower elevations of the watershed. We can see a general sort of shape of the river, of the creek itself. And so these are very important to us from a wetland restoration standpoint. And so you see this extensive wetland down here. So these are all things that we can use for ecological restoration and design purposes, because we can go out and see how many or if the species are there, if the landowner is amenable to working with us to do restoration activities. All of these kinds of things come from these maps. And so this is another type of description that we used from early visitors who wrote descriptions as they traveled through the region. And this one is this particular activity is really interesting to me because this is an artist from Georgia who read the descriptions of William Bartram, who traveled through the region in the late 1800s in 1791. And Philip Juris then takes these descriptions of the traveler, and in addition to visiting local examples of prairies, and these are some of his working drawings that he did prior to this particular landscape, this vista that he has painted. This is a modern representation of a historical landscape, and he has done these for all of the places where Bartram where Bartram visited. And so these are really powerful images that we can take to landowners and use in presentations like this that help people to see what the landscape was like at the time of these surveys and at the time of early settlement by European landowners who were moving into the areas. So again, these are some working drawings from Philip Juris that he did in preparation of the previous large landscape painting, which is an oil on canvas. It's an incredible, incredible work. And so then we take this information and we engage with stakeholders in our watershed. And so stakeholders, I'm not sure if you use this term in Europe, but stakeholders are basically the people who live and work in the landscape, but we also extend it even to the wildlife of the landscape, as well as the people who, or the plant communities as well. And so this is, from Google Earth, one of the locations of those historic prairies. And so we can go out and into the field and verify ground truth whether or not there are remnant plant communities here, how the area is currently being managed, and work with the landowner and the stakeholder to help them to manage for some of the goals that we have established as watershed managers. And so in particular, watershed management plans, wetland management plans, and then we use these also for regional biodiversity management. And so to wrap up, we have numerous historical documents that are very important to us to help paint a picture both for ourselves and for our stakeholders of these historic ecological communities. They are of these documents are of very high interest to the people who live in the watershed because it helps them relate to the history of their property, and it allows us to get buy-in from those stakeholders because they're usually very interested in the history of their property. They tell a story that the stakeholders can easily understand. And then if we can find remnants that are similar to these historic landscapes, we can help people see how the landscape functions and the importance of these historic plant communities and animal communities. And then I would really, the benefit of being involved with this group and working with people like Juicy in the Someto River watershed is that I would like to take what I have learned from these American documents and apply the same process in the Someto River and try to help there with the ecological restoration of that particular watershed, and also then report back how we use this information. Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this series of webinars. And I'm not sure how you're going to handle questions, but I think you're going to do those at the end. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. So thank you, Tim, for the presentation. Now we shift to the second one because we save question, answers, comments for the end. So yes, can you stop sharing and then I'll ask, thank you very much. And I'll ask Katherine to share her screen.
Okay, I am stopping. I should be stopped now.
Thank you. Katherine, the floor is yours.
And you're muted, Katherine.
Thank you. It's just will take a second to upload for it to upload.
Yes.
All right. So thank you so much to Manuelina Darte Gandito and Juicy Papalardo for inviting me to participate in this exciting series of conversations. I actually think some of what I'll say today will resonate with Tim's presentation. So for the last 5 years, I've been doing participatory ethnographic research in the Someto Valley in Sicily, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I know you know from Juicy that there is a group of citizens engaged in creating an eco-museum, and I have been following that process very closely over the last year from a remote space. And I didn't feel like, although there's so much that I can talk about there, I didn't feel like I quite had the sense of place and the sort of on-the-ground knowledge that as an ethnographer is really important to me. And however, the opportunity to participate in this set of conversations and the work with the Eco Museum really gave me an opportunity to reflect on previous fieldwork in Australia and think about what I know about and what I have learned about the connections between place, belonging, culture, ecology, identity, and community. And I'm going to do this today through the lens of my ethnographic research in La Perouse, a suburb of Sydney, Australia. And I'm going to explore how Botany Bay as a place and the traditional owners of the area are co-constructed and constituted over time, and the ways that Indigenous people make connections across time, space, and landscape in ways that expose sites of colonial entanglement, Indigenous belonging, and give possibility to Indigenous autonomy. My hope is that in exploring these dynamics in the next 20 minutes or so, it might spark new ways of thinking about cultural heritage, eco-museums, and alternative development more generally. So before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the Guagal and Dhurawal people, who are the traditional owners and custodians of Kamay, Botany Bay, and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. So appropriately, this story begins with a museum. 25 years ago, I began what was to become a 12-year relationship with members of the La Perouse Indigenous community. The suburb, named for a French explorer and botanist, sits along the northern shore of Botany Bay. These shores, with their white sand and rocky cliffs, have long been home to Indigenous Australians. However, when I first arrived in La Perouse in 1996, their presence was largely unmarked. So one of the first places I went to figure out how to connect with the Indigenous community was the La Perouse Museum. I was hopeful that the old cable house would be my gateway into connections with the local community through a cultural interpreter. However, I was naive. Rather, what I found was a museum dedicated to Jean-François de Galoup, Comte de La Perouse, and his ship, the Astrolabe, which had arrived in Botany Bay in 1788, several days after British ships by Captain James Cook. Aside from a few artist renderings of Indigenous people that had been drawn by crew members, there was little indication that the museum sat on Indigenous land or that there was still an Indigenous community living nearby. When I asked the museum manager about this, she replied, "See that big brick house over on the hill with the Aboriginal flag? You'll have to go over there to find Aboriginal people." So as I quickly came to learn in the 1990s, Australia was on the grips of a reckoning with its relationship to Indigenous people. Native title legislation in 1992 had recognized Indigenous peoples' traditional rights and interests to land and waters under traditional law and custom, and subsequent land claims and demands for recognition frequently fueled the public imaginary about Indigenous culture and debates about Indigenous authenticity. This often resulted in the omission of urban indigeneity from the national cultural imaginary. So as I would learn over 1, 3, and 12-month stints of ethnographic fieldwork in those 12 years, is that Indigenous residents in La Perouse were resolute in their connection to place, their ancestral history, and the ongoing significance of their heritage, even if and when others could not or did not see them. So I'm happy to say, before I get into the sort of unpacking all of that, happy to say that this has changed a lot in the last 25 years. Thanks in large part to local community members and organizations' advocacy, as well as national reconciliation efforts. However, in these early days of my fieldwork, the presence of Indigenous absence had a profound impact on me. It not only shaped how I would do my dissertation research, but it also shaped how I came to see and understand the complex interrelationship of human, natural, social, and political worlds, and the ways identities emerge in these human-place entanglements. So with a nod to Tim Ingold, this presentation sets out to trace the relationship between place and identity and what these connections can help us understand about what I'm calling restorative attachment. And I'm using this idea of restorative attachment to refer to eco-human solidarity in which identity, place, and becoming shape representations of, connections to, and uses of particular place-based resources. And to see the potential for restorative attachment in the context of a post-colonial space like Australia, I draw on Bell Hook's articulation of the ways place and placemaking can illuminate marginality, and Indigenous scholars' attention to both traditional ecological knowledge and the ways stories give meaning to places and material objects that are often not visible to outsiders. When I lived and did ethnographic research in La Perouse, my Indigenous hosts took me places, invited me to events, told me stories, recounted their experiences of living and being from La Perouse, shared childhood memories, and described the taste, sounds, and boundaries of this place. In short, they taught me, as Anna Singh describes, to pay attention to the patterns of human and non-human assemblages that make up landscape structures. Equally, they taught me that these connections are not always about what you can see, but also about what you feel and know. So I'm going to focus in this presentation on three spaces: public, everyday, and extraordinary, where members of the Dharawal community create, contest, relate to, and make meaning of their connection to this place through various aspects of the physical, social, and spiritual environment. La Perouse is a place where Indigenous people and landscape bear marks of multiple, sometimes simultaneous occupations. Indigenous boundaries have no regard for non-Indigenous divisions of land into parcels, suburbs, horse paddocks, national parks, golf courses, or historic sites. And in the next few slides, I'm going to juxtapose the sort of Indigenous pre-colonial mapping of place with the colonial and more contemporary maps to draw our attention to the different ways of knowing and being connected to these spaces and places. For Indigenous people in La Perouse, the connection to this place extends along the south side of Botany Bay and beyond to the south coast of New South Wales. Often invisible to the average eye are signs of 7,000 years of Indigenous occupation, shell middens, rock engravings, rock shelters, axe grinding grooves that trace Indigenous lifeways and movement along the southern side of Botany Bay. These pre-colonial sites form a lifeline to the present and the future. Rock carvings along Botany Bay reflect the lived landscape, marine ecology, and activities of pre-colonial peoples. Depictions of fish, whales, turtles along the bay are not uncommon, although some have diminished over time, as the photo on the left suggests. Today, the whale carving is almost invisible, the rock worn down by winds and water over time. Below is the drawing depicts what the carving looked like in 1891 when it was recorded by a surveyor. It is a mother and her calf, nearby a fish and some tools. Dharawal, the name for whale, was also the name of the place now called La Perouse. The site is believed to have served as a ceremonial site for initiation and hold mythical meanings. Other carvings depict wildlife of the area, directions on the natural resources available in particular locations. These carvings provide directions for Dharawal people today. In a very physical way, they evince Indigenous relationship to this place and to other sites in New South Wales. And they're known to attract the public, tourists, and hikers. However, not all are publicized. Their locations and meanings are sometimes only known to local Indigenous people and parks and wildlife. Their protection today is overseen by National Parks and Wildlife in cooperation with the local community. Here we have colonial maps, and they offer a glimpse into the first 100 years of occupation. And I don't have time or even the in-depth knowledge of maps to sort of go in depth on these, but I will draw your attention to the middle map and to the red line. And this denotes the rough location of what would become the original reserve for Indigenous people. By the 1880s, this space would be controlled by the Aborigines Protection Board, and Indigenous peoples' movements would be limited to a very confined space. The areas shaded in yellow, blue, and pink indicate privately owned property, mostly farms, and their acreage. And the headland marked in green is labeled government reserve, which is now the location of Kameh-Botany Bay National Park. And finally, more contemporary maps reflect that indigenous people in La Perouse were never fully isolated from indigenous people, non-indigenous people. The creation of a tram line in 1918 created new connections to the Loop at La Perouse and the Yara pleasure grounds, which were particularly popular in the 19 teens, 20s, and 30s. Additionally, you can see in this Google map from on the far left, the far right, evidence of the sort of industrial modernity. So a paper mill, power station, a garbage chip, all of these framed the coastal and inland boundaries of the area, and later an oil refinery, container terminals, and finally the Sydney airport. And these changed the morphology and ecology of the area significantly. Importantly, the Loop served as a public space for indigenous culture, even in the early periods when indigenous residence movement was strictly surveilled and limited. Making artifacts was a social, relational, economic activity. It connected artifact makers' knowledge of local environment and cultural knowledge with artistic skills and an interested public in important ways. The knowledge of where to find mangrove knees, timber needed to cut and shape boomerangs, and the aptitude for woodworking have been handed down within families of these early craftsmen and craftswomen. Boomerang workshops provided a place for men to gather, swap stories, and instruct the next generation. Likewise, women gathered shells from particular locations in Botany Bay and along the south coast, and not just any shell would work. As the quote suggests, the work of a shell day ties multiple generations of women together and links them to locations beyond La Perouse. Transforming a bag of buttons, as they're colloquially referred to, into objects is precise work. Women would gather together, spread the shells on a table, sort them, and begin to match size and colors as they decorated various forms, sometimes shoes, the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and even today, the Sydney Opera House. Over time, indigenous culture at La Perouse attracted many well-known guests, such as Anne Margaret, and the demand for indigenous culture took indigenous people to festivals such as the annual Royal Easter Show in Sydney and to places as far away as Paris. Today, many of these artworks are visible on display in local museums, including, I'm happy to say, the La Perouse Museum. The Loop, with its rich history of relationships and as a site of a place to sell artifacts, is also a place where outsiders can come into contact with colonial history. And so in this sort of picture captures this moment. When I arrived at the Loop to sit with the artifact maker, as he sold boomerangs, he was talking to a family of two men and their children who had stopped to ask about fishing techniques. He was explaining that there's a fruit that has a poison in it that is like arsenic, and it's used to stun fish so they could be caught more easily. Before they left, my friend had the children put their hands down into a bucket of red ochre and then stamp on the rock. The stamp on the rock they were standing on in order to, quote unquote, leave their mark on the land. I suspected Nick's sense of ironic humor guided this interaction. After I left, I noticed there were two pots of ochre, and I asked him, what's the difference? He said, this is a talking point. It's the Aboriginal flag right here. Pointing to each bucket, he explained, red ochre, yellow ochre, and then laughing and pointing himself, the black fella. in moments like these, we can see the kind of passionate educational exchanges as well as sort of reclamations of colonial impact on indigenous people. These kinds of exchanges are invitations to non-indigenous people to see history and landscape and indigenous culture in a new way in light of colonial contact. And these kinds of interactions begin to do the political and relational work necessary for restorative attachment. Some relationships between humans and places are semiotically embodied. They are experienced by the body's movement or lack thereof. And human-place connections can be enmeshed in bodies and in nature. And the dreaming trees provide one way of understanding the everyday experience of these kinds of connections. Along a road that connects commercial and residential areas of La Perouse to the beach sit these 3 Moreton Bay figs, and to the casual passerby, there's little indication of the significance of these trees. However, within the local indigenous community, residents' feelings of connection and memory suggest there are strong traditional, ancestral, cultural, and spiritual values held in these trees. As Iris Williams describes, saying, there isn't anything to remind us of our old people because we don't have monuments or statues. There are these Moreton Bay figs on the old reserve. One stands alone. And we all know that old people lived under the tree and children played around it, and it was never damaged in any way. These trees mark the location where her direct ancestors lived. They mark the boundary of the old reserve. And one of the trees is dedicated to Queen Emma Timbury, who was one of the founding ancestors who was part of the early reserve at La Perouse. Recently, these trees have been added to the New South Wales Significant Tree Register, and the application noted their biological uniqueness and the importance of these fig species, originally native to the coastal rainforest of the Illawarra area, which is slightly south on the south coast, and not in La Perouse. A shield found under one of the trees with the inscription 5 Islands is believed to reference this area down the coast, and thus these figs are thought to be linked to the traditional movement between La Perouse and the Illawarra region. While some details of the earlier significance and practices related to these trees cannot be known today, the emotional connection is evident. They are a reminder of an ancestral attachment to place and the importance of recognizing and protecting both indigenous and natural resources in La Perouse. Culturally, the ocean is significant, sometimes referring to themselves as saltwater people. Fish and seafood have been part of the local diet for thousands of years. It is likely that these food sources are part of the reason for the seasonal occupation of the area in pre-colonial times. Additionally, the landscape itself holds memories and meanings that connect humans to the marine ecosystem of the bay. As I was reminded one afternoon walking along the track from the old reserve to the loop to get some exercise with an auntie. As we made the loop, she recalled playing games on the hills and in the dunes, and talked about how for snacks they would gather oysters and pippies and boil them up using a billy can. Being able to quote unquote get a feed of berries, nectars in the bush, or shellfish from the sea was a source of pride for elder members of the elder generation. And in this, it reflects indigenous knowledge, knowing what was edible, where to find it, and was an important way of passing down culture from generation to generation. Seafood provided food resources to households in times of economic struggle. Indigenous fishermen's knowledge and careful observation of marine wildlife and knowledge of how to navigate the bay is also significant. As one longtime fisherman explained, we've got spots. We go out there by boat and we mark them off by places on the land. This still goes on today. We go to different places fishing, and I learned them off the old fella, referring to his father. He showed me where they are, and I've tried to show my young blokes, referring to his sons. We've got good fishing grounds around here, different spots, different fish. For many people at La Perouse, fishing was a lifestyle and means of survival, and indigenous fishermen were particularly known for pulling in large hauls of netted fish and diving for oysters. However, commercial fishing, the development of shipping container stations, and the international airport along the north side changed both the morphology of the ocean and the shoreline, and thus have changed the ways local people fish and what plants grow in the area. Strict regulations on the types and amount of fish that can be caught and an expensive license process have often make it difficult for indigenous people to access this as a profession, much less as to feed their families. Additionally, in the 1980s, New South Wales restricted the use of netting, a technique traditionally used by indigenous people at La Perouse. It took 35 years of advocacy for New South Wales to grant traditional owners of Botany Bay cultural fishing permits. This only happened in 2016. And this change reignited local interest in fishing and teaching the young indigenous people how to use these techniques, as this image here on the right shows. Additionally, this re-engaged and reinvigorated an interest in environmental stewardship. And just last year, the local area land council and the Gamay Rangers, a group of indigenous marine wildlife officers, took a strong stance against the cruise ship landing being built at Yarra Bay. For now, the cruise ship is on hold. The cruise ship landing is on hold. And these changes, especially the restoration of fishing rights and the reinvigoration of handing down of knowledge and skills to younger generations, exemplifies another facet of restorative attachment, one that highlights the interconnections of humans, the environment, culture, and intergenerational knowledge sharing and advocacy. My final example is of the extraordinary. The relationship between indigenous people in La Perouse and its place is also defined by boundaries that mark the spaces that bodies can and cannot go, and the spaces where they were taken from, as well as the spaces they are returned to. In the 2000s, La Perouse was one of many communities across Australia to successfully reclaim indigenous human remains from museums, both in the UK and Australia, and repatriate them to La Perouse for reburial. At least 7 reburials have occurred around Botany Bay in the last 2 decades, and I had the privilege of attending 2 of these ceremonies during my fieldwork. My interviews with the local area land council suggest this involved complex and difficult negotiations, and there were many politics both at in the local community and between institutions that surrounded these processes. But in practice, these reburials symbolize an acknowledgement of the colonial past and institutional disregard for indigenous life, culture, and death, and dignity in death. However, they were also acts that reconnected ancestors to the living and the land in a very tangible way. As one elder said during the ceremony, "This is a sad and a happy day, and now these people are home, warmed by the sun, lit by the moon, and back at home. If tonight we look up at the sky, we'll see 7 bright stars and the biggest corroboree going on up there to welcome these people home." The repatriation of indigenous skeletal remains from museums, especially in the Australian Museum, opened a path to new relationships between the museum and the local indigenous community. Likewise, reburials offered an important ceremonial opportunity, an opportunity to craft a new and significant form of burial ceremony that draws both on tradition and modern technology like GPS. One ceremony I attended took place in an area adjacent to a golf course near the national park. After the ceremony, attendees came together for a meal. I talked with one of the attendees who arrived to the meal late, and although I did not know him well, I asked him what he thought about the reburial. His answer captures the complexity of indigenous connection to place and the entanglement of indigenous culture, colonial history, and contemporary meaning making. He said, "I was just walking around looking at things, because this was never a place that we were allowed to go. They used to get pinched for vagrancy walking up the Lynx Road that connects La Perouse into the national park. We couldn't go into the bush or for food or anything, and weren't allowed on the golf course for sure. It was interesting to be there now, to be there for the reburial back on the land. The reconnection of long removed ancestors from Botany Bay to a place where for decades of the late 19th and 20th century, indigenous people were not allowed to go, sits alongside of the renegotiated relationship with both museums and the national parks and wildlife. Again, this suggests the possibility for restorative attachment to operate at multiple levels across space, time, and culture. And to conclude, I want to bring us back to the sort of bigger questions that are posed by the Babel Tower series. So when we think about the pathway to restorative attachment in La Perouse, what lessons do we take away? How did La Perouse go from a space of indigenous absence to an indigenous place? And sort of reflecting on this presentation, first, restorative attachment is a long road. It's a process of becoming that includes the known, the unknown, the felt, the seen, the experienced. It was helped along, at least in the later decades of the 20th century, by federal and state policies that recognized and protected indigenous rights and cultural heritage. For the Dhurawal people, the path has included a long history of advocacy and indigenous people calling for recognition, standing up for their rights as traditional owners and stewards of the bay, and this process is still ongoing. Second, it has included an attention to the handing down of knowledge from generation to generation within the community, and the willingness to engage and educate the public about indigenous history and culture, even when that's sometimes uncomfortable. This has been done formally in books written by community members, through the pursuit of graduate degrees in indigenous studies, as teachers in classrooms, as well as informally within families by recording and sharing elder stories, taking deep dives into the archives, and being in the place, experiencing it, and all of the sensations, physical and mystical, that come with knowing and belonging to a place. And finally, indigenous people's relationship to La Perouse and Botany Bay reflect a changing relationship with institutions, one that began with resistance to early settlers, then was transformed into a paternalistic relationship when indigenous people were controlled by the Aboriginal Welfare Board, and eventually has moved towards self-governance, and today to a fully empowered and self-determined indigenous organizations that can engage with institutions, whether local governments, museums, schools, and even developers, with the full knowledge and confidence of their belonging to place. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Katherine. And again, the question will be at the end. So we'll move to Donatella Murtas. Donatella, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Giusy, and thank you to all the other organization people, the team, and Manuelina. That was a great opportunity to be with you, to be involved in that, and to listen to you, to all the guests, and as well now, just a few minutes ago, to Timothy and Katherine. That was really inspirational. So I tried to do this magic touch and to share.
And we cannot see you. Your camera is off.
My camera is off. Yes.
Okay, now it's on and we can see your screen.
Okay, right. Could you see now?
The screen, yes.
Okay, great. Is ready.
I think the camera is still off. I don't know.
I think that I think that Donatella should push on the Partecipa button, if I'm not wrong.
That might be. Could you see my slides?
We can see the slides, yes. We cannot see your face, actually.
Well, that is because now that has disappeared, all these sort of buttons. And if you don't mind, I will show my face at the end.
Okay, it's okay. Yes.
Thank you so much. So I keep the theme just enlightened by Katherine. So it is the spatial everyday, and my talk would like really to show you why I do believe in eco-museums and why I do so, especially when we speak about the everyday, not the banal everyday, but the special everyday, where the quality of our lives live. And so why I think eco-museums are unique in that aspect. So again, I have a story to tell you, and it is partly my story. And so I was involved in eco-museums right at the beginning in 1995, when the first regional law on institutions of eco-museum was launched by the Piemonte region, that is right there where you see the red arrow, so nearby the border with France. And we guess, we as Piedmont Eco-Museums, that the proximity with France made easier for the eco-museum idea to get into Italy, because we were so close to each other. And the opportunity was given by a really small water mill that was abandoned, as usually those buildings are abandoned because generally speaking, they belong to the past, not to the present. And few people knew how to make it working again. But nevertheless, it was thought to be the best idea to restart the empowerment of the local knowledges and the empowerment and sort of sense of belonging of the community in there. We are in the mountain, in the Alps, so it's a very small community, but a lot of desire to restart again, thinking about ourselves and find through culture a new possibility to develop not only opportunity in the present, but especially in the future. So there it was, this rotten building inside a sort of chaotic situation. And the idea was to restore the building, to be able to make the water mill work, and as well to link the skills that were there, and step by step to move from one building to the landscape, and then to move to other places, to other sites, and to restart what was connected to the water mill. So from where the seeds came from. So it was a rye cultivation that was almost abandoned. And the decision of the people involved in the eco-museum project was to plant again the seeds and start with a new cultivation of rye, and then use the rye to make a bread that was locally sold, but as well was offered to the tourists who came quite often to the Alps, and to find something that was not only good, but also had a wonderful story behind. And from that mill, then the people move and the project moved to other places linked with the ice making, with the ice storage, with the code, so incredible link and story that was moving from Norway to Piedmont and to this valley to Torino. That was the capital of the region. So it was quite a sort of challenging project, never-ending project. And step by step, it was enlarging, getting new energy, getting enthusiasm. And all of that was well defined because all of those little pieces were actually making the big picture. And the picture was within the big framework and the name of the museum project. So this really shows the power of the name. Without maybe the museum name, every little piece would have been divided, would have been isolated, but the museum gave actually the opportunity to see the big picture and the role of each piece into the big picture. And that is how it works. So as that could be in this kind of landscape, apparently you have nothing, or apparently you have a lot. What the ecomuseum role is about is to select from where to start and why, what to link, what to make, which kind of narrative you offer. That is not, again, a stereotype narrative, but it's very specific, very much dedicated to that special place, and it is right tailored for that place, for that community. Through ecomuseums, there was this extraordinary new idea that what was visible, what was meant to be heritage, was not only through the usual little window, but actually the window could be opened and could show a lot more that quite often was not seen, not because it was not in there, but because eyes and minds wouldn't see it as a heritage. And there was a great revolution, it really was. The big revolution was linked to the meaning of values. Somehow we were taught that values are forever. So values who were in the past are in the present, will be in the future. But we know more and more that is not true. Values changes again, not necessarily objects or landscapes. They might be the same, but values who are attributed to them does change very much, because we as societies, we change as well very much. Look at the piece of bread or a flour or cheese or different corn. None of them would have been seen as heritage 30 years ago, 20 years ago. But more and more, we are discovering that as precious, something that we have to cherish, something that we have to value and keep. Because from that is not only, again, the quality of our everyday, but is the opportunity to start a future that is very much linked to a single place. Look at the landscape with all these magnificent dry stone walls. That could have been destroyed 30 years ago because that were really annoying the large kind of agriculture with tractors, with massive agricultural fields. But luckily they were not, because it was thought, we are in the north of England, in the Yorkshire, that those walls were actually representing the history and the character of the place. And thankfully, the Countryside Commission of England saw them as a sort of key point in keeping the character of the place and keeping the character, again, the self of belonging and the attraction of the place. So if values change, needs are linked to that. And through the needs, so through the demand, opportunities. And then needs plus opportunities make awfully a new energy, that is the energy for changing, adapt to what it is needed. And that was also that a great point that I've always found really clever in eco-museums, because it's a never-ending experimental approach. It's always open. You have a framework again, but then you can move within the framework, being sort of coherent with the mission, but then you can actually adapt to the local situation and again to what is needed. So this is a funny picture, funny slides, but my desire, my wish was to show that each terminology, each name is made not only of different letters, but of different contents. So every eco-museum, despite it deals with heritage, with local heritage, with community participation, will be different, because local community will look at the local heritage in a different way. And because through that vision, that is not one way, but is a return way as well, you can fuel what it is a really tailored local development. So it's a flare from the museum to the local heritage, to the local community, to the local development, and backwards. Is like a sort of flare of energy, flare of ideas, flare of meanings that is alimenting all the time new concepts that are still coherent with the main title. And is an energy that envelops everything, from which the local community could actually take again the energy and especially the reasons to go with that. So to look at themselves and look at what it is around and recognize that the things were thought of being of no interest actually could have an interest and could be a big interest. So the exercise, if we can speak about exercise, is rethinking, rebuilding the meanings, the sense of place and the sense of living. Where are we? What shall we do? What are the kind of qualities we have, skills? How could you make everything together? How could you make it as a project? How could we actually build a community through the landscape? So through the vision of the heritage and the landscape. Many people nowadays, at least in Italy, speak about the circular economy. And I really think about more than economy. At the very bottom is the circular sort of trust. So trusting each other, community doesn't work if there is not a sense of trust within the individuals who made community, and through trust, the credibility. This is, I think, a crucial kind of approach. So we are building credibility with the museums, because without credibility, the medium and long term of the project on its development won't be achieved. It will stop in between after a few months, a few years, and everything would apparently come as it was. Many times people ask me, so how could I recognize an museum? What shall I look for? Well, that is a crucial answer, but I have the crucial question, but I have no answer if not saying that you have to look at the landscape, so the big scale, and but especially you have to you have to belong part of the place, and you have to meet people and through them to understand actions. So if the landscape is actually the skeleton, the muscles are represented by the actions. Without actions, an ecomuseum can't be an ecomuseum. Without action and people involved, so living every day, you won't ever have an ecomuseum project. So projects and actions and choices and stories, those are variations that you only understand when you are part of an ecomuseum or where you are becoming part of an ecomuseum through its projects. So each of those 6 features are representing somehow not an ecomuseum, something that is very linked to ecomuseum because it is about people and places and sense of belonging. So I want to tell you the story of a project that is an ecomuseum project in which I have been involved since the beginning. So again, we are in Piemonte, and the south part of Piemonte. And you can see this is a picture that was taken in, around 1980s. And thankfully, there was a picture because I discovered lately that it is quite rare to find photos of terrace landscapes at that time. Because terrace landscape was not seen as such. It wasn't seen as heritage. So look at the hills. Well, for Italy is hills, but for any other country it could be a mountain. So the top of the hill is around 700 meters, the bottom 200 meters above the sea level. So you have more than 600 meters of terraces. So dry stone walls, cultivation, houses, a stunning system of canals and water keepings and paths and animals. Everything was in there, but not seen as a big scale and not seen as heritage. When was it seen as heritage? Was when it started to collapse. And because it was because many people living in there, as every other part of Italy, after the Second World War, decided to go in town, in cities, and many rural landscape and rural places, if not abandoned, became really with less people living in them. And when people have less inhabitants, might happen that something that is not very nice happen because you have no big numbers to oppose to choices that will become very sad choices. And so it happened here. You see on the bottom left a river. There was the Bermuda River, and the story linked to the river was one of the worst story about water pollution. It was a river badly polluted by a chemical factory nearby for 100 years, and it was said that the river because it was impossible for fishes, for any other living creature to live in there. And as well, were almost impossible to live nearby, to use the water for watering the cultivation. And there was an awful situation that was stopped by the local people who actually for more than 50 years struggled against the big factory and the support given to the factory by the political sort of bodies at national, regional, and local levels. So through the river, when the factory was forced to close, the valley found itself sort of in a no man's land, because the energy that was put in the fighting against the poisoning factory was so big that the time to think about heritage, think about some that was not linked to surviving, was not of interest, was not crucial to the place. But because of the river and the water was not usable and drinkable anymore, you can imagine that all those terraces started to be abandoned. And if you abandon terraces, they collapse because they are human-made. And so the story of the ecomuseum starting in that specific point, the stop of the factory, the collapse of the terraces, and not of the last, a terrible flood that was making the situation of civil environmental erosion even worse. So the idea was the local administration in Corte Emilia, so it is a village of 2,000 inhabitants in these days, decided, knowing that there was a law, a regional law, they decided to try and to go for an ecomuseum project, because they thought, and I was there talking to them, that the ecomuseum had the power to look at the present and at the future, and to especially to be used as a cultural lever to move from negative to possible, to negativity to possibility, from the marginal to the center, and to again to give energy to the local community, and so that to move from the impossibility of doing everything to the possibility to do something that was of value for themselves. Why terrace landscape? So the terrace landscape is a perfect terrace because it is made with continuity. So it links elements of the landscape and it connects the past with the present and hopefully for the future. So it was the classical kind of definition of ecomuseums: people and places, past, present, and future. So a few people thought that the terrace landscape was heritage, and the elements that made the terrace landscape were as well heritage. How could that message spread around? Because that as well is the tricky point. Is a group of people that goes and makes the team, the ecomuseum working team, but then this is step one. Then after step one, then you have the two, the second and the third and the fourth, and all of that make the path, the ecomuseum path, solid and energetic. So how to involve in that thinking the local community, and not only the local community, but of course the stakeholders and the nearby people and visitors who came to Corte Emilia during the summer especially. So participatory exhibits were one of the tools. So each year for different years we put a big tent in the main square so that the ecomuseum became something that was normal, not extravagant. And there we have, we asked during the previous month of the exhibit to people to give us information in the way that Timothy showed us, people going into the land, taking notes, asking for old picture, for new feelings, new perceptions, and making all together to tell a story. And the idea was not only to tell one story. That specific one you see now on the slide was about the landscape of wine. And they say that costruttori di paesaggi means people who actually built the landscape, who are the people there, the dwellers, the winemakers, the farmers, all of them. So the landscape is in there because all the communities somehow participate to the building of the landscape. And so we gather all the points of view of the people in there. And on one side was the stories about Corte Emilia, and on the other side were the story of another place. Each year we invited other communities having a similar story, but developing the same theme, the same subject, with their specific culture, with their specific information, with their specific point of view. And this idea was really so welcome that from the first year that was an experiment, we moved from the second and the third and the fourth, and it was a great opportunity to gather information. And so that as well, the visitor who came and see it were able to compare what was specific for their place, what was similar to the other one, and what was different from the other reality. And then step by step, from building the meanings, that I believe is really the first step of building this sort of sharing the strategy, sharing the reasons of the project, we move into the really solid, tangible heritage. You see on the top, on the left, it is a farm that is sitting on a promontory that is totally terraced. It was an abandoned farm, an abandoned land. So through the Ecomuseum, we are able to convince the 6 owners to sell it to the Ecomuseum, and so that it could become a community place, and especially a best practice where to show the traditional ways of cultivating the wines, making different kind of vegetable, keeping the fruit orchard that is on the back, and especially hosting during the summer people coming from all the rest of Europe, willing to learn about how to make dry stone walls, willing to share and to give their time to the restoration of the place. It was something unbelievable, not only for the group, the museum group, but also for the local people who actually saw with their eyes that something that was thought impossible was actually possible. And again, from vines cultivation, we started to produce the Ecomuseum wine, and that was the first time since the end of the pollution of the river that the wine production started again. That was a key economy in the past. It was totally flattened by the pollution, and that was again re-put in place through the Ecomuseum project. And through that, the importance, you see apples, you see that there are many apples today. There were even before, more before, and that it was possible to keep them and to use the dry way, so dry stone, dry fruit, to keep it for a long time. And again, using the marketplace as the key places to meet people, to tell stories, to share stories, and to listen to what other people had to say, and because that again is a crucial point for a museum, not just to speak, but to listen. And it is another site, a small, really abandoned, another story of abandonment hut using for drying chestnut. And again, how unbelievable was that step by step we restore the building because the skills were there, and the museum gave the opportunity to skilled artisans to use the capability and then to rebuild it, but then again to use the skills and knowledges to go and make the cycle from the chestnut forest to the chestnut on your dish, and the group of people trying to understand how to interpret the heritage, how to find the best narrative to say the importance of this small place. And then we move into intangibility. So the funny bear that is on the left up was a traditional wild carnival that was totally lost, and we were so lucky to find few a written description in a book, and so through the help of a group of anthropology, we put the lost carnival into the present, and then we move around the Mediterranean to find where other wild carnivals were, and then there was the space again to invent special cakes for the carnival, who linked the feather of the hands, actually the fur of this wild bear, with the cornflakes. You see those at the bottom. And again, generative ideas. So that is a crucial role of eco-museums, to offer new ideas, and quite often creative ideas that were not there, but then they can flourish if the soil is a fertile soil. So you can imagine this place that was almost nothing, new ideas, knowledges, and shaping the future and look at development. Let's just few slides to say we move from another place. We are in Szentgyörgyi in Serbia, an old coal mine, nearly there to close, and the idea with this community regeneration to move from of the place, so the coal mine, to involve the people and to give the power to them, because without the local community involvement, no heritage will have been moved into the future. And the coal mining story again was well, the starting point, but with a working group, we quite soon discovered that the story was larger than the mine in Szentgyörgyi. It was about all the land nearby, and it was linked with water again, it was linked with pipes, with the underground, but as well with the upground, and when religious places. So it was a word in itself, it was what we called a local word in itself. And again, from the feeling of being in the very derelict place, we starting not with maps, but with a sort of maps, and just using a piece of chalk and putting on a big green board all that could have been seen as heritage, tangible and intangible, and put arrows and linking things, linking the times, the year calendar. And at the end, everybody was impressed by the richness of heritage that was in there, and obviously not looked like heritage before. And we even moved to a definition that was quite striking to me, because in Italy, when you say heritage, that is, well, something not always a name that is very understood by every people. You have in mind culture. And I was really surprised when they say something of economic and spiritual benefit. That was really an inspirational moment for me. And this is why I put that in the slide for you. And when you get into the mode of energy and you play with it and you play with the heritage in a serious way, but also enjoying that, you become aware of that you can try. And as well, because they wanted to have tourism, because the normal museum was probably meant to be in use in a few months, they decided how they want to promote themselves. And that is a sentence that was not made by a communication expert, but by them. So again, they speak for themselves, they act for themselves, they were the people who were welcoming people coming from outside. So just to end, what can I imagine? I imagine that eco-museums are a sort of a magical place, magical way, magical tool to open something that is closed, when you can see millions of flourishing plants, metaphorically. And it's a chance to explore. And nevertheless, what I always enjoyed is the joy, the fresh joy, and the enthusiastic approach that people usually have. So nothing more than dealing with local development, because all of that gives you a reason, many reasons to stay, and many reasons for people to come, especially when we are speaking about marginal rural areas that finally could become center, a new center for the people who live in there, a new center for people who want to be there. And that is. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. It was really, really inspirational. All the presentations were great. So we are running late, so I invite Martina to start with her comments and questions. Meanwhile, if other people have questions, please raise your hand through the team button, or you can write in the chat if you can use the chat, or yeah, I mean, just think about your question, and if you cannot use the chat or raise your hand, just open up your camera and ask your question after Martina. So please, Martina, the floor is yours now, and then we look for other questions and comment.
Okay, so thank you very much, Giusy, and I'm really impressed by the three presentations, I have to say. Yesterday with Giusy, we were discussing about how to relate the three presentations and which were the common points, and actually they seemed quite heterogeneous. But on the contrary, today I was really impressed, pleasantly impressed, by the fact that the three presentations come up really strongly together around what I have to, maybe because it's in my mind, but I see quite clearly around what was our sort of first hypothesis with that we discussed with Giusy and Manuelina about the role that, and this is an open question, that the eco-museum could play in the future and in the contemporary time. That is really a difficult one. So I'm talking about the transition that you all know. So the ecological and economic transition, and also of another thing, because I'm urbanist, and what we see now, what I study, is this changing form of the contemporary city, and how the city and the territory are becoming more and more one thing. And so this sort of presence of inhabitants really distributed in the territory. So it's a sort of obsession for me, this fact that the inhabitants of today, of the contemporary city, are really dispersed in the territory more and more. And at the same time, with climate change and ecological fragility, we have more and more, and these inhabitants are more and more disconnected from the environment. And on the other side, we have an urgent need, on the contrary, for stewardship. So I'm really sort of keeping some precious words that coming out from presentation. So if I go back to Katherine, eco-human solidarity, restorative attachment, So the relevance of stories on one side, but then if I go to Tim, it's habitat restoration, ecological design. So they all build up together. So in our hypothesis and mind, in the role that ecomuseum could have in bringing back people to teach them. No, so I go also to Donatella's words. It's a tool, so a magical tool that it's able to construct a new gaze on the territory. No, a new gaze and also a new capacity, because people, what I feel is that people need more and more to know, to understand their environment and to act on the environment. So to have a sort of stewardship on the environment. So my question is, and it's sort of very broad and open, could ecomuseum actually play a sort of structuring role, a sort of at an urban scale, a territorial scale, to really teach sort of a new attachment and new understanding of ecological resources? I'm thinking also of Watershed, that Tim was speaking about watershed management, but really in a sort of fine-grained manner to sort of rebuild this tissue that has been really sort of spoiled and opened up. So something that was present in the past and we have sort of lost. Now we have these inhabitants that are more and more dense around the territory and dispersed, and they could, with their action, that is a dispersed action, could really play a role to steward the environment. So yeah, so that was my thought, and I would like to know what you think about it. Thank you.
So I guess it's for the three of them. If Donatella wants to start as it's focused on ecomuseums, and then we can open around with Tim and Katherine.
Yeah.
I think they can.
Do you want to start, Donatella, answering?
Yes, I was had a problem with the microphone.
Okay.
Yes, I think that the ecomuseum, especially today with this crisis, that is not an emergency, health emergency, but also is a general crisis, environmental and social. I really believe they can play a crucial role in reinforcing the sense of the capabilities. So people understanding how great they are, how many skills they have, and those skills are the right skills for the place where they live. Because again, it's a kind of banalization of skills. So in these years, all those people who were the expert at the local level, they were thought to be Neolithic people. So people who were living in the past and not believing in new capabilities. But in these days, we are showing, well, not we as a large community, that traditional knowledges are essential to live in a sustainable way within these rural areas more than urban area. So I was thinking that quite often, well, a way of reading ecomuseum could be seen not only as actors of local development, but as a service, and then I go to you, Martin, that is in there to support the local community. So it's more about sort of pact that is written between people and stakeholders. I think ecomuseum could well be regarded as a service for a local community, like schools.
Thank you.
Tim or Katherine, do you want to react to this And then please, if you have other questions or comments, just raise your hand.
Yes, I would say that it's a part of the expectation for a watershed resource management plan in the United States is that you have an outreach plan. And so the idea of an eco-museum is, I think, a really nice way to package that outreach, where yes, you could have a physical location, but now the eco-museum could be a virtual space. The eco-museum could be a combination of the two. It could be educational materials, just as Donatella just referred to. And I think that the idea of an eco-museum is not very, at least that I know of, and correct me if I'm wrong, not very widespread in the United States, but it is one that would spread rapidly within the watershed management community, were it better known and embraced as part of that outreach for watershed management that is expected for any funding at the watershed level requires a watershed management plan. And that watershed management plan has an outreach plan that could easily incorporate all of the ideas that Donatella and Katherine presented about into the eco-museum idea and house it in a lot of different ways.
Thanks, Tim. Katherine?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the way in which eco-museums might be connected to sort of indigenous, territorial, and natural resource claims, and thinking about it in terms of some of the work we've seen, like in New Zealand, where you have rivers and other land formations being given the rights of human beings, and thinking about how an eco-museum might sort of energize and give both meaning to, and maybe a little less sort of less level of dauntingness to the idea that physical spaces in the landscape and ecological formations can have the rights and be protected in the ways that human beings are protected. And that may be a very useful tool in those contexts.
Yeah, I have to say that this connection with the school is quite strong, and we should reflect on it, because it's really something that can be really diffused and go in depth in a sort of educational structure. So yeah, very useful. Thanks.
Thanks. We have Pauline.
Yes, I have a question for Katherine Lambert. You talk about an emotional relation between people and space, and I'd like to know if there are a bigger part of old people, of young people, and which part takes the different group in the relation with the space, the place, sorry.
So that's an interesting question. I mean, my experience has been that that age is not a factor in whether people have emotional connection or experience in La Perouse. What is a little different is the way they interpret those emotions are interpreted, or the way that they feel about places. So, for instance, some young people, so in thinking about like the dreaming tree example, many older people sort of attach a very strong feeling of connection to ancestor, sort of an embrace of those trees in ways that make them desire to be physically present with the trees, sit under the trees, etc. While younger people, some younger people are a little afraid. They're in the sense that they recognize their significance and their sort of cultural power, and they're not sure exactly how to interact with that. I think there are some spaces also, like for the example with the French children leaving their mark on the land, the sort of stamping, right? That there is a sort of that scene reminds us of both the sort of identity claim, that strong sense of passion of place and sense of belonging, but also some sort of anger that is there of this sort of not having the kind of recognition in that public space that is obviously part of the landscape itself in terms of the indigenous history. So I'm not sure so much that age is the factor, because many of the sort of the broader emotional connection is handed down and sort of reinforced, socially reinforced across generations in the community. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there other questions? Okay, Manuelina.
So thank you very much for all your interventions, very rich, a lot of topics to discuss maybe later. But one topic for me is very important to underline the role of the eco-museums in the ecological transition. Because I think this point and the point that eco-museums are connected with people more than with objects is what can inspire the traditional museums to look for the future. I cannot be without look for traditional museums, because as a professor at the university, we are obligated to prepare the students also for this market of traditional museums. But I insist a lot in this topic of eco-museums, and one of the reasons is because I think we have a risk that museums are only connected with past, and eco-museums can inspire to look for future, what is really much more important. One Brazilian museologist, Mário Chagas, talks a lot about museums linked with necrophilia. I don't know exactly if this is English, but the idea that this kind of museum, social museology, community museology, or eco-museums are more connected with biophilia. So I would like you comment this. It's not a question, only to comment.
Who wants to start? Donatella, Tim, and Katherine, as we did before, maybe.
I had sort of really bad audio, so I couldn't really understand exactly the question because of echo going backwards in and out. So if you don't mind, Manuelina, just I'll leave it to Katherine. Your question to repeat or before maybe Katherine can answer, and tune to that.
I also have a proposal, as we are really running late. I think you can discuss that later on, because also your now that you have talked, I don't know if it was my problem, but I couldn't hear you properly. So if Katherine and Tim want to comment on that, and then we can, as we said before, we aim this as a starting point for a conversation that can last even in next times. And I also at the end want to invite you to the next webinar. I'll say it later. So if very briefly, Katherine and Tim want to comment on this very important comment that Manuelina has given.
Yeah, I will say very quickly, Manuelina's comment is important because I see this as a history that was forgotten and now is reimagined and more appreciated. So we went through a period of not understanding how important the history of these landscapes was, because for whatever reason, that would be a research for many people to conduct, I'm sure, but I don't know why we forgot all of this information, why we ignored it. We thought that maybe we were heading in some direction through the Industrial Revolution that was going to take us to some kind of nirvana that clearly has not materialized. And so now we look to these historic documents and eco-museums for the answers to our future inhabitation of these places, and to do it in a better way, maybe more efficiently, maybe with better results ecologically, and to understand the landscapes that we're a part of much better, because it does seem like we just ignored these ideas for so long that now we have reconnected with these past ideas, and it's going to be a good thing going forward.
Yeah, I mean, just to round this out, I agree. I think that eco-museums offer a new way to think about the future in ways that really can connect a through line or a lifeline between past and future. And I see this a lot, in particular, like in the work, as I mentioned towards the end of my presentation, in the work of sort of the local community organizations, indigenous community organizations in and around La Perouse, working specifically with youth, but working, doing the sort of political environmental work to pay attention to and stop poor development and development that will further denigrate the ecological environment. And that is part of the sort of educational component of what they're teaching young children as well. So as we think about sort of moving into the Anthropocene, right, and to sort of addressing climate change going forward, that kind of socialization and training that connects sort of past tradition with current resources and then protection of these resources for the future, I think is really important. And I think that's something that eco-museums can do really well, is sort of pull those three components together.
Thank you. As I cannot see any other hand raised, and if there are last minute questions, we can still take one. Otherwise, let me start saying you that we're gonna stop for a while, and next meeting is gonna be March 29th. And that meeting that webinar is going to be very important. We will have Donatella again as a speaker. We will have many speakers. We invite you all, because for that day, we will present the book of De Varenne, which has been recently translated in Italian. So there will be an opportunity for the Italian network of Ecomuseum to gather together. But of course, it is open to the Babel community, also because this book has circulated a lot in the international at the international level. So please, for you all, don't forget that specific webinar. I mean, each webinar is important, but that one, as we are going to have the father of eco-museums, which is De Varenne, discussing his last book, we really encourage you all to take part to this one. Donatella will have another opportunity to talk a little bit, although there will be many people commenting. It will be it will be done from a variety of perspectives discussing this important book, and then we'll also have the comments by De Varenne himself. So I think now, if there are not any other last minute questions, just Manuelina has written in the chat the name of the book, which is I don't know if I pronounce it good in French. It's Le Musée Singulier Pluriel. That's the origin. I don't know if I got it right. So please, thank you again for today, and please be with us March 29 for this the presentation of De Varen's book. Thank you again. It was very inspiring, and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.